tax-free £10,000 in cash to spend however you like. You'll also receive the very latest iPhone 16 and we'll send you on a shopping spree with £500 to spend in your favourite store. For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB11 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 7th of March. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Britain's Newsroom. I thought we'd got to the end of the show. I said goodbye, we'll see you tomorrow morning, and then you take a break, and I'm afraid you're back with us. It's PMQs, I forgot.
So it's PMQs today, of course, and Kemi Bainett will have a feast of things she can talk about. One of the things she might ask about is this growing rumour that some of the extra defence spending he's announced is actually going to be given to...
The Chagos, well, to
Mauritius to take the Chagos Islands off our hands, even though they've never ever owned it.
So in other
Billions.
words, it's a way of siphoning that money, making it publicly palatable, that rather than say we're giving, what was it, 18 billion or something?
9 billion.
9 billion, thank you. We're giving 9 billion of this promised military funding actually to Mauritius to take the Chagos Islands back.
And because then we lease back the defence base that's on there, which I'm sure it's going to come up with Trump tomorrow, with the Prime Minister.
Yeah, he's not happy about it, is he?
No. Well, nobody knows why they're doing it.
No.
The cost of living, the farmers.
Yeah, you see, the thing is, Kemi Bainett is in a difficult position here because she knows that a lot of people that might vote for her are Trump supporters. If she makes too much of Keir Starmer following Trump's direction, she's got to be careful that doesn't endear him to some of her electorate. So she can't point the finger and say, ha, you're just following what Trump tells you to do, because a lot of Conservatives at home might go, well, we'd quite like you to be a bit more like Trump yourself, love.
Well, I think Gloria was right. She should talk about the cost of living crisis. That is the biggest issue that people vote on at elections. That's why the Tories got so badly waxed last year. People were sick to death of them, but also we had a cost of living crisis.
You're so right. That's be so easy with the energy price cap going up. Here we go.
I think we're going to go over to the chamber now. I think the Prime Minister is about to get to his feet.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This week marks 3 years since Putin's barbaric invasion of Ukraine.
The courage of the Ukrainians is inspiring, and across this House we stand with them for as long as it takes. Mr. Speaker, that's why we're increasing defence spending to 2.5% of GDP by April 2027, with an ambition to reach 3% in the next Parliament as economic and fiscal conditions allow. And this afternoon, of course, I will travel to the US to have discussions with President Trump about the enduring security partnership between our two countries. Mr. Speaker, I'm also delighted that we've announced the first 750 schools to start offering free breakfast clubs. This is our plan for change in action, ensuring every child has the chance to thrive. And Mr. Speaker, I'm sure the whole House will want to join me in thanking Amanda Pritchard for her services as Chief Executive of the NHS England, and I wish her well for the future. This morning, Mr. Speaker, I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my duties in this House, I shall have further such meetings later today.
Dr. Luca. Could the Prime Minister tell this House whether the outcome of his budget was by design or by mistake? Did he mean to push 100,000 pensioners into poverty with his own analysis when he removed the winter fuel allowance, or was that a mistake? Did he mean to decimate family farming when he changed the inheritance tax, or was that a mistake? And did he mean to tax GPs, care homes and hospices when he raised NICs, or was that a mistake? Prime Minister, could he tell the House, are these acceptable collateral damage in his path for change, or simply a mistake that need rectifying?
I'll tell you what was a mistake, leaving a £22 billion black hole that we had to sort out. We took the difficult decisions, investing in our NHS, and I would have thought he would have welcomed the 2 million extra appointments that we've achieved in the first 7 months of a Labour government. That's the difference our budget is making to people.
Delighted that Carlton and Grange primary schools in my city of Gloucester will be part of the first 750 schools to get free breakfast clubs. And I'm pleased that this government is already delivering on its manifesto promises in less than a year. So will the Prime Minister agree with me that by helping working parents with childcare and delivering the best start to the day for every single child, we are delivering opportunity for the next generation?
Well, I agree with my honourable friend. We're pleased that 2 of the early adopter schools will be in his constituency. Mr. Speaker, we're ensuring that all primary school children aged can get access to free breakfast and at least 30 minutes of free childcare. And that means every child ready to learn, and parents, of course, supported with up to £450 a year back in their pockets. That's the change a Labour government makes.
We now come to the Leader of the Opposition, Kemi Bennell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I wish the Prime Minister every success on his trip to Washington. The visit to see President Trump must serve our national interest. The Prime Minister and I are completely united in our support for Ukraine as a proud and sovereign nation. What specific steps will he take to ensure Ukraine is at the negotiating table for any peace settlement?
Well, I thank her for her words about the forthcoming trip. And it is right, and I think the whole House will think it's right, that Ukraine must be at the table at negotiations. There can be no negotiations about Ukraine without Ukraine. That has been my consistent position in all of the discussions that I've had. That will continue to be my position, because this is about the sovereignty of Ukraine and their ability to decide for themselves the future of their country. So they must be at the table.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the Prime Minister for that answer, and as I said, I wish him every success. We want to support him on this issue. So turning to the details of the plan he set out yesterday. Over the weekend, I suggested to the Prime Minister that he cut the aid budget, and I'm pleased that he accepted my advice. Mr. Speaker, it's the fastest response. It's the fastest response I've ever had from the Prime Minister. However, he announced £13.4 billion in additional defence spending yesterday. This morning, his Defence Secretary said the uplift is only £6 billion, which is the correct figure.
Prime Minister.
I'm going to have to let the Leader of the Opposition down gently. She didn't feature in my thinking at all. I was so busy over the weekend I didn't even see her proposal. I think she's appointed herself, I think, saviour of the Western civilization. It's a desperate search for relevance. But, Mr. Speaker, look, if you take the numbers for this financial year, and then the numbers for the financial year 27-28, that's £13.4 billion increase. That is the largest sustained increase in defence spending since the Cold War, which will put us in a position to ensure the security and defence of our country and of Europe.
Mr. Speaker, that wasn't very clear. How is it that the Defence Secretary says £6 billion and he says £13.4 billion? The IFS said today that the government is playing silly games with numbers. How does he find this difference in numbers?
Mr. Speaker, we went through this 2 weeks ago, going through the same question over and over again. So let me say it. If you take the financial year this year, and then you take the financial year for 2027-28, the difference between the two is £13.4 billion. That's the same answer. If you ask again, I'll give the same answer again.
I'll decide it's more. Come in.
Mr. Speaker, someone needs to tell the Prime Minister that being patronising is not a substitute. It's not a substitute for answering questions. It's not a substitute. He hasn't answered. What he has said is different from what he said yesterday. We are still not clear where the money is coming from. We want to support him. He's also said that we should put British troops on the ground in Ukraine. We haven't seen the detail of any proposals. Would his new spending plans allow him to fund this commitment effectively?
Prime Minister.
I mean, I think it's the same question again. It's £13.4 billion. That's the difference between this year and 2020. She asked a serious question about the security guarantees in Ukraine, and that is extremely important, because the worst of all outcomes, if there's to be a cessation of hostilities, is that it is a short break rather than sustained and lasting peace. And I think that that means there's got to be security guarantees. I've indicated that we will play our full part. There has to be US backing, because otherwise I don't think it will deter Putin. We are working on that. I'm having extensive discussions about it. Not in a position to put details before the House, as she well knows today, but I'll continue down that route, because I want a lasting peace in Ukraine and Europe for the safety and security of Ukrainians, of Europeans, and of course for everybody in this country.
Mr. Speaker, this is an endeavour that we want to support him in, but we need to know exactly what it is we're supporting. We need clarity and transparency over the money. We also need to know where this money is going. This morning, the Defence Secretary could not say if the Chagos deal would come out of the defence budget. Can he confirm to the House that none of the defence uplift includes payments for his Chagos deal?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the additional spend I announced yesterday is for our capability on defence and security in Europe, as I made absolutely clear yesterday. The Chagos deal is extremely important for our security, for US security. The US are rightly looking at it. When it's finalised, I'll put it before the House with the costings. The figures being bandied around are absolutely wild of the mark. The deal is well over a century, but the funding I announced yesterday is for our capability to put ourselves in a position to rise to a generational challenge. That is what that money is all about, and I thought she supported it.
Speaker, we need to make sure we are supporting a plan that is clear and transparent. Yesterday, the Prime Minister set an ambition for defence spending to reach 3% in the next Parliament. We agree with him, but this could be 2034, almost a decade away. That is too slow. We don't know how he will pay for it. We cannot raise taxes further. We already pay more on debt interest than defence, and everyone in this House would have heard him not answer the last question. So I will ask him again, is he paying for the Chagos deal with this defence uplift or not?
Prime Minister.
I've just dealt with that question. She gave the money announced yesterday is going to our capability to put ourselves in a position to defend the security of our country, Europe and the UK. And she asked about defence spending. She gave what people have described as a rambling speech yesterday when she couldn't say what defence spending should be. We've been absolutely clear. We've set it out, a full, credible, costed plan, and I thought she supported it.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister will be aware that in coastal communities like mine in East Thanet, people develop cancer earlier, get treated and diagnosed later, and die younger. Can he give the House an update on the plans for the government to implement the recommendations by the Chief Medical Officer, Chris Whitty, into tackling poor health in our seaside towns?
Prime Minister.
Well, I thank her for raising this. She's right that cancer patients are waiting too long for diagnosis and for treatment. Addressing healthcare inequity is part of our 10-year health plan, Mr. Speaker, aiming to halve the gap in healthy life expectancy between the richest and the poorest regions, and we're making progress on that already.
Leader of the Liberal Democrats, Sir Ed Davey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I start by wishing the Prime Minister well on his trip to the White House? It won't be an easy meeting, but we're all behind him for our national interest. But it's already clear that under President Trump, we won't be able to rely on the United States, sadly, to help ensure our security against Russian aggression. And that's why we strongly welcome the Prime Minister's decision to increase Britain's defence spending. But Europe must do far more to rearm in the face of Putin's threat, and the UK must lead on that. That's why we back the idea of a new European rearmament bank, so we can finance a big increase in the manufacturing capacity without the need to cut Britain's vital soft power. So will the Prime Minister look at this idea, work across this House and across Europe, so we can make a European rearmament bank actually happen?
Prime Minister.
I'll resist his suggestion that we've got somehow to choose between the US and our European partners. I do not believe that to be the case, and I want to strengthen our already strong relationship with the US, because I think it's vital that we do so. I, of course, want to work with our European allies on defence capability and what more we need to do in relation to capability, coordination and funding. And in the longer term, there is a discussion going on amongst allies as to future funding. We're part of that discussion, and I'm happy to share that with the House as it evolves.
Sir Ed Davey.
I hope he's successful in keeping the US on board with our European allies, and I'm glad he's talking about finance defence. I think if he was to push this European rearmament bank at the summit on Sunday, the European leaders, I think he'd be pushing an open door. Certainly Prime Minister Tusk is supporting from the Polish point of view. But Mr. Speaker, if I can turn now to domestic matters and the cost of living crisis that's hitting so many of our constituents. Families in my constituency are really angry that Thames Water is sending them bills this April that will cost them £150 a year more. Thames has already let down so many people, whether it's leaking pipes or pumping their filthy sewage into our rivers. A third of customers' bills are already used just to pay the interest on Thames Water's debt, and now it's going to borrow £3 billion more. Isn't it time to stop making people pay for bailing out the vulture funds drowning Thames Water in debt? Will his government just put this firm out of its misery, put it into special administration so we can sort out that mess and the mess that lot left?
Well, he's certainly right about the mess that lot made. We've obviously got the water bill. It's got very strong measures in it, and I think he supports them.
Dr. Rosanna.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. We have heard extraordinary rhetoric coming out of Washington in recent days, and we have seen fascist salutes on our screens. We have witnessed wild statements about Palestinians being expelled from Gaza, and we have seen our allies labelled dictators. Britain's interests are best served by standing with Ukraine, working closely with our European allies, by upholding international law and remaining a strong part of NATO. Can the Prime Minister assure us that this will form a central part of his message when he meets world leaders this week?
Minister. We certainly stand with Ukraine, and I think I speak for the whole House when I say that. And as I set out yesterday, NATO is the bedrock of our security. It's been our most important alliance for many, many years, as important today as it's ever been. And we build that alliance by working with the US. We have a special and deep relationship with the US. That's not just words, that's to do with security, defence, intelligence capability, vitally important for both sides. But we also work with our European allies, and it is that ability to work with the US and the EU and European partners that has held the peace for so many years and needs to hold the peace for many years to come.
Stephen Flynn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Prior to the election, the Labour Party promised to reduce energy bills by £300, yet on their watch, energy bills are about to increase by almost £300. So may I ask, is the failure to keep that promise a consequence of government incompetency, or have the Labour Party been caught lying to the public?
Mr. Speaker, we're very proud of the fact that we are pushing forward for energy independence, which will keep our bills lower. And he knows very well what my position is, but I note that, again, he's very quiet on the SNP record, and I'll tell you for why. Just this week, we've seen the attainment gap widen in Scotland, pupils leaving schools with no qualifications rising, those from deprived areas going to work falling. Instead of playing the politics of grievance, they need to take responsibility for their own record.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My constituent Mike Addison was one of a kind, a physical disability rugby league world champion with England and Warrington Wolves, and an avid volunteer for the club and foundation. He was a friend to everyone who knew him. Tragically, he died at age 45, having taken his own life. One death by suicide is too many, and every suicide is preventable. But ONS data puts the rate in the North West at over double the rate of London, and with a 17% increase last year. So can the Prime Minister outline what more can be done working across government to help Warrington meet our target of eliminating suicide?
Prime Minister.
Well, can I thank her for raising this tragic case? And my thoughts, I'm sure the thoughts of the House, are with the family, friends and teammates of Mike at Warrington Wolves. I mean, she's right, Mr. Speaker, that one death by suicide is one too many, and reducing the number is a vital part of our health mission. We are recruiting an additional 8,500 mental health workers, especially trained to support people at risk of suicide. We're committed to taking forward the suicide prevention strategy for England. I'm sure this is something the whole House will support.
Dr. Neil Butts.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I welcome the Prime Minister's statement committing us to increased defence spending and reaffirming the UK's support for Ukraine and their democratically elected leader, President Zelensky. A wartime leader, like Winston Churchill, who also had to delay elections because his country faced an existential threat. As the Prime Minister travels to Washington, with this House and the country willing him to succeed, will he invoke the legacy of Churchill in making the case for the UK to be the key in bridging transatlantic relations, to bring us all together for the sake of freedom and democracy across the world?
Prime Minister.
I thank him for his question. Can I pick up on both elements? Because President Zelensky is a democratically elected leader, and suspending elections was precisely what we did in this country when we were fighting in the Second World War. And secondly, on his point, yes, I do think that the UK has successfully been a bridge between the US and Europe for many, many years. It's vital that we continue in that role, and that's why my message to President Trump is that the relationship between our two countries needs to go from strength to strength. It's all very strong, but also working at the same time with our European allies.
Jessica T.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On Monday night, there was a brutal double stabbing in my constituency. This adds to a long line of horrific knife attacks that have included 3 fatalities over the past 2 years. I know the Prime Minister is aware of the particular challenges we face in Bournemouth, and while crime has been going down, I know there is much more he will want to do. So will he join me in praising the crucial work that organisations like Changes Are Made, who give positive activities like boxing to young people, and will he share what more the government can do to tackle knife crime in communities like mine?
Prime Minister.
Thank you for raising this really important issue. Yesterday we introduced our crime and policing bill, which is central to our plan for change and halving knife crime. It involves new powers to seize and destroy knives found on private property and a new criminal offence of possessing a bladed article with intent to cause harm. Plus, Mr. Speaker, tougher penalties for selling dangerous weapons to under 18s, stricter rules for online sales under Ronan's law, and we'll continue with that work.
Rankin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The floods of 2013-14 devastated Datchet, Horton and Wraysbury, and the flooding last January wasn't much better. But shockingly, the River Thames scheme as currently proposed continues to leave my constituents at risk. The Council was asked to cough up tens of millions, but like very many, is cash-strapped. Does the Prime Minister, therefore, agree with me that the only option to protect my constituents is funding Channel 1 of the River Thames scheme as the national strategic infrastructure, which it really is?
Prime Minister.
Well, I know the honourable member has raised this issue before, and it's obviously an important issue for his constituents. We inherited flood defences in their worst state on record, Mr. Speaker, and that's why we're investing £2.6 billion to protect over 50,000 properties. I understand that the options to reduce flood risk to these communities are being considered as part of the Datchet and Hythe End Flood Alleviation Scheme, and I'll ensure that he has a meeting with the relevant minister to take forward the work.
Sally Jameson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In order for the government's growth agenda to be a success, it must be felt in all areas of the country, including Doncaster and South Yorkshire, where we have green growth transport companies, including hybrid air vehicles and clean power hydrogen, alongside the reopening of Doncaster Sheffield Airport. So will the Prime Minister put on his record support for Mayor Ros Jones, who has led on the airport reopening, and also set out how the growth agenda will override those traditional patterns of investment mainly in the south of England and bring prosperity to South Yorkshire and indeed the north as a whole?
Yes, I will. Doncaster's got a proud industrial heritage, rail, steel and coal, an extraordinary potential for industries of the future from hydrogen to AI. And we are focused, Mr. Speaker, on devolving more power and funding to metro mayors to support regional industry. We will work with the mayors of Doncaster and South Yorkshire to support efforts to reopen Doncaster Sheffield Airport.
Graham Lambitter.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have the privilege to represent the home of Speyside malts, some amongst the finest Scotch whiskies. Last week, the UK Government unveiled damaging plans to grant a different definition of single malt to English producers to that of Scottish single malts. This is entirely inconsistent with the global reputation of the quality of single malts and seeks to tear up a well-established definition of what a single malt is, pulling the rug yet further from underneath the Scotch whisky industry. Given the backlash from the industry to this and the damage this could cause to Scotch whisky exports and jobs, will the Prime Minister's word on whisky be his whisky bond by backing the industry to the hilt and scrapping these plans?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we do support Scotch whisky. It's a really important part of our economy, and that's why we allocated £5 million in the budget and why we're working with Brazil, which is worth £25 million for Scotch whisky. It's what we're doing to support industry and sectors in Scotland. And in addition to that, in another sector, at the weekend I was very pleased to be able to announce the £200 million investment in Grangemouth and the future for generations there.
Steve Race.
Yesterday I returned from Ukraine, having spent 4 days with a cross-party delegation of parliamentarians. The Ukrainians we met from across society had one simple message. They were deeply thankful for our partnership, and they want us to know that they can overcome the Russian invasion because they must. Does the Prime Minister agree with me that alongside our welcome 100-year partnership, now is the time for the UK to redouble our efforts alongside our European partners to help secure Ukraine's future as a free, democratic and sovereign European nation?
Yes, I do, and I'm really proud of the way the United Kingdom has risen to the challenge of the last 3 years in a united way, both in terms of the capability and funding that we provided to Ukraine, but also the throwing open of homes here for those fleeing. And I was privileged to welcome some of the families to Downing Street on Monday, and it was a human reminder of the impact that it's having on them, their children and their families.
Dr. Kieran Mellon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, the whole House wants the Prime Minister's meeting with President Trump to be a success, which requires credibility on our defence spending commitments. The Leader of the Opposition gave the Prime Minister an opportunity to unambiguously rule out the funding of any Chagos deal coming from the defence budget, and I'm not clear that he did that. But I want him to be taken seriously in Washington, so I'll make it really easy for him. Will he rule out the funding of any Chagos deal coming from the defence budget, yes or no?
Yes. Speaker, as I said, when the deal is complete, I will put it before the House with the costings. The money yesterday was allocated to our capability, the single biggest increase, sustained increase in defence spending since the Cold War.
The whole country stands behind the people of Ukraine. But there is also a view that taking money from aid and development to spend on armaments and tanks makes people less safe, not more safe, because the desperation and the poverty that so often leads to warfare is what aid and development money is supposed to counter.
Well, Mr. Speaker, as I said yesterday, the overseas development is important. I'm proud of what we've done. It wasn't a decision I took lightly or I wanted to take, but it is important at this moment that we put the defence spending, the defence and security of our country and Europe uppermost. We will, of course, make sure that we're able to fulfil our humanitarian obligations in relation to Gaza, Ukraine and Sudan and other vital work, and I want to be clear that we do, of course, want to go back and increase that funding as soon as we're able to do so.
Simon Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hope the Prime Minister knows that when he does travel to Washington to meet the former leader of the free world, he does so with the hopes and prayers of this House and the country. Probably no more serious a meeting could be taking place. Now, whilst Ukraine will clearly dominate, will the Prime Minister undertake to raise with President Trump that Canada is a valued, respected and much-loved member of both NATO and our Commonwealth, and that this childish nonsense of a 51st state should be called out by the Prime Minister for what it is?
Prime Minister.
Well, I thank him for raising this issue. UK and Canada are close allies and have been for a very long time, with a partnership based on a shared history and a shared set of values and a determination to be an active force for good in the world. We work closely with them on issues of the Commonwealth, on NATO and, of course, Five Eyes, intelligence sharing, and we will work to strengthen that relationship.
Michelle Scrockham.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Barrow-in-Furness has always been ahead of the times in terms of high-skilled engineering. In light of the Prime Minister's historic commitment to rise defence spending, the biggest increase since the end of the Cold War, I invite him to visit and see the many SMEs who could support this vital supply chain. Does he agree that investing in these businesses will not only deliver our nuclear deterrent, but improve security and the economy for us all?
Well, I thank her for raising this question, and we'll obviously consider her invitation. Defence spending, Mr. Speaker, already supports more than 430,000 jobs across the United Kingdom, and I'd like to recognise the contribution made by the workers in Barrow-in-Furness.
Wendy Morton.
Mr. Speaker, in my constituency, the planning inspector chose to use the term grey belt to pass a battery energy storage system application before the order was laid in this House to change the NPPF, and without recognising the moratorium for local authorities to manage their local plans. This decision failed to recognise the green belt that protects us against urban sprawl, and it failed to recognise the proximity to a school, a church and a graveyard. So can the Prime Minister define what grey belt actually is, or is it simply a grey area to allow for inappropriate development?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm not across the details of the individual case that she raises, as she will understand, but I am in favour of making sure that we can have the infrastructure and the houses that we need to grow our economy. And one of the problems we had in the last 14 years was an assertional rhetoric that we wanted homes and infrastructure, but when the decision all that came up, the answer was always no. The answer cannot always be no.
Can I thank the Prime Minister and the Foreign Secretary for their efforts to secure the release of Allah Abdel Fattah, the human rights campaigner, the British human rights campaigner, who's been imprisoned in Egypt now for over 10 years. The Prime Minister will know, because he's met the family, that his mother is on the 150th day of her hunger strike and her health is failing rapidly. Could I ask the Prime Minister to pick up the phone to President Sisi and seek the release of Allah to save his life, also that of his mother's?
Prime Minister.
Well, I thank him for raising this really important case, and as he says, I did meet the mother and the family just a few days ago, and it is an incredibly difficult situation for them, and I can assure him I will do everything I can to ensure the release in this case, and that includes phone calls as necessary. I've raised it before, I'll raise it again, we raise it and will continue to do so. I gave my word to the family that that's what I do, that I will do, and I will.
Hannah.
People in Northern Ireland are sick to the teeth of paramilitaries, of the menace, of the sectarianism and of keeping people stuck in the past. In light of the announcement yesterday on transition, does the Prime Minister recognise that people will be highly sceptical of this process, that there must be real learnings from the failed transitions of the past, that there can be no rewards for paramilitaries for hanging on, robust criminal justice, the flags off the lampposts and on street corners, and community-funded policing to allow communities that have been brutalised by paramilitaries to finally look forward to a confident and shared future?
Prime Minister.
Well, I thank you for raising this important and obviously sensitive issue. We are committed to making progress towards ending paramilitarism once and for all in Northern Ireland, and that's why we've agreed to support a short independent exercise to look at a formal process, and I'll make sure that the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland keeps her updated.
Rishi Sunak.
Mr. Speaker, prostate cancer is now our country's most common cancer, and yet there is no national screening programme. We made progress towards this in government, but yet there is more to do, which is why I'm delighted to have joined Prostate Cancer Research, the charity, as an ambassador. I'm grateful to the Health Secretary for his engagement thus far, and could I ask the Prime Minister to ensure that we do have a targeted national screening programme for the most at-risk groups of prostate cancer, so that we can not only save the NHS money, make progress towards the government's early diagnosis targets, but most crucially, save thousands of lives.
Prime Minister.
Well, can I thank him for raising this, and can I thank him for using his authority and reputation to support this vital cause, which will make a material difference, and I look forward to working with him on it. We do share a commitment to detecting prostate cancer earlier and treating it faster, and we must do that. Our National Cancer Plan will improve the way we treat cancer right across the country, and I'll make sure he's fully informed of the steps that we're taking, and we'll work with him.
Ruth Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the Prime Minister join with me in wishing all Welsh citizens everywhere a very happy St David's Day on Saturday? And will he also join with me in welcoming the latest news of the £600 million investment by Copenhagen infrastructure partners to ensure that Bute Energy and Green Gen Cymru can take forward the bold ambition to achieve 100% green electricity production by 2035 in Wales, thus providing much-needed sustainable green jobs for the people of Wales?
Prime Minister.
Well, can I wish her and her constituents a very happy St David's Day and join her in welcoming this significant new investment into her constituency that will ensure good jobs, well-paid, skilled jobs, and of course the transition to energy security and lower bills. And I know her constituency will play a vital role in that.
Jeremy Hunt.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the Prime Minister agree that our biggest single foreign policy priority is the preservation of NATO with America at its heart? And if so, following his welcome announcement yesterday, is the next step to talk to our European allies and for all of us to agree to spend 3% of GDP on defence within a specified timescale so that we can look the President in the eye and say that Europe is finally pulling its weight on defence?
Well, I agree with him entirely in terms of the priority in terms of NATO. Putin thought he could weaken NATO. He's only made it stronger and larger. NATO's strength comes from the US and European partners and others working together, and that is absolutely the focus of my work at the moment. It is right, as he says, that European countries, including the United Kingdom, do need to do more on capability, on coordination, and on defence spend. That must be not seen as a project separate to NATO, but part of an essential project that ensures that NATO is there for decades and decades to come, preserving the peace, just as it has been for 75 years.
Final question, Newman.
Mr Speaker, the Grangemouth refinery closure has loomed over central Scotland since Petronas's announcement in November 2023. 2 weeks ago, Scottish Labour colleagues and I met with the National Wealth Fund to make the case for investment in Grangemouth. I strongly welcome the exceptional commitment this Labour government has shown by committing £200 million from the National Wealth Fund. Can I ask the Prime Minister what steps the government will be taking to secure permanent, good jobs at Grangemouth?
Well, can I thank him for being such a great champion for Scotland and his constituency. Mr Speaker, Grangemouth is really important to communities in Scotland, to the economy in Scotland. It's not a charity case, it's got incredible potential, huge opportunity, and that's why at the weekend I was very pleased to announce £200 million from the National Wealth Fund to incentivise private investment. That, of course, Mr Speaker, follows £100 million in the growth deal that we announced earlier. This is about jobs for decades to come in Grangemouth. It's a really exciting opportunity and we intend to seize it.
I hope His Presidency of the Assembly of North Macedonia, His Excellency Mr Afrim Gasha, enjoyed questions. Right, that completes PMQs.
That was Prime Minister Keir Starmer taking questions from MPs at the House of Commons. We're now going to cross live to Westminster Hall, where our political correspondent, Catherine Forster, who has the most amazing vantage point, she's in that chamber watching from the gallery and listening to what the exchanges are. So what were your main takeaways from the exchange, Catherine?
Yes, good afternoon, Tom and Gloria. Well, first of all, unity in the House of Commons. It doesn't happen very often, does it? But of course, this huge meeting that the Prime Minister is now going to be rushing off to today to catch the plane to talk to Donald Trump tomorrow. The whole House behind him realising just how very, very important that meeting is and that it goes well. So much riding on that. But then Kemi Badenoch, I thought it was a tricky PMQs for her because, of course, the PM has just announced something that everybody seems to want pretty much, this big increase in defence spending. One of the reasons that Kemi Badenoch was made leader of the Conservatives was that Tory MPs thought that she would be incredibly strong in basically taking apart the Prime Minister at PMQs. Well, it doesn't seem to have worked out like that, because she went at him over the defence spending figures, the fact that he said 13.4 billion, John Healey suggested 6, also on the Chagos Islands. And what struck me was how he pretty much just battered her away. She said, well, you know, I had the idea of cutting foreign aid spending at the weekend, so, you know, you're welcome for my idea. Something, of course, that Reform also suggested. And he just came back quite brutal, I thought it was, saying that she hadn't featured in his calculations at all, that he hadn't been aware of it, says that she's appointing herself saviour of Western civilization in a desperate search for relevance. And on the defence spending numbers too, she kept on at him because he did not give a satisfactory answer on that, let's face it. But he was quite it's like a school teacher telling off a naughty child. She did pull him up on that, and she said that basically being patronising was going to get nowhere. But we didn't get much in the way of answers on the difference between the figure he gave yesterday and the 6 billion that John Healey has said, nor on the Chagos Islands. Now, Robert Jenrick has put out a very interesting video today that's really setting the cat amongst the pigeons. There's a critical question over whether the money that we're potentially going to have to spend giving the Chagos Islands to Mauritius and paying for that for 99 years will come out of this defence spending that's been announced. Answer came there none. It's worth saying there's a briefing going on with the Prime Minister's official spokesman right now with journalists. I've had to come down here, but I did catch the Prime Minister's spokesman just before PMQs and asked him, and their get out of jail free card for all of this is basically there currently is no deal. If and when the deal is decided, then we will come back to you with the figures. Very convenient, some might say.
Kicking the can down the road. Well, Catherine Forster, thanks indeed for joining us live from Westminster Hall in the Houses of Parliament. Brilliant stuff. Well, we're joined in the studio now by the Labour Member of Parliament for Pendle and Clitheroe, Jonathan Hinder, and the Shadow Energy Minister, Andrew Bowie, acting Shadow Secretary of State. Yes. For the meantime. Let's...
Thank you for all the questions that you
absolutely.
have been submitting. gbnews.com/yoursay. That's what this programme's about, your questions.
Quite right, and let's put one of those questions to our panel now. Jonathan, thanks for being with us, first time on the show.
Pleasure.
David from Yorkshire has got in touch. He says that Keir Starmer's agreed to spend this extra money on defence from 2027, but the question is, will the Prime Minister renege on this promise before 2027, a couple of years away, as he's backtracked on so many other promises in the past?
Well, I don't know what David's referring to there, but I think the Prime Minister's taken a really clear step. Great leadership that he showed in the House of Commons yesterday, bringing forward this commitment to 2.5% of GDP. So there's absolutely no question of going back on that. It's happening. We've set out that we're going to get to 3% in the next Parliament as well. So I think the direction of travel is very, very clear. It's something that I was calling for in the House of Commons the day before the Prime Minister made that announcement, so I'm absolutely delighted with it.
Well, the Prime Minister has backtracked on promises on tuition fees, on promises on tax rises for working people, on promises for nationalisation of industry, on many different promises that he's made over the course of the last 4 or 5 years. If we have seen U-turns from this Prime Minister.
If you look at the manifesto, we said we weren't going to raise taxes on working people, and we haven't.
National insurance has gone up on employees.
So we said we weren't going to raise taxes on working people, and that's been kept to. So I don't think there's any point talking about leadership pledges that were made, in the Labour Party. We're now a party of government, and we're delivering where the Conservatives have failed.
OK. I'm actually going to change the subject slightly. And I want to bring in John. Mm-hmm. So, Kemi Badenoch, you heard Catherine Forster, our political correspondent's assessment there. But this is what John says. Here we go. No question about the cost of living. I'm really panicking come April. My wife has just lost her job after 20 years' service due to ill health. We've received no help so far from the DWP. That's a very specific example. Yeah, no. But there is no doubt that people are hurting out there. And I don't think, and we watch this, of course, every week, as do you two, I don't think she's raised the cost of living once at Prime Minister's Question Time, and I think it is the biggest issue.
Well, I couldn't say whether or not, in all honesty, whether she has or hasn't, I can't remember, but it has been raised multiple times in the House of Commons by members of the Conservative Party questioning some of the decisions that have been taken by this government. And my goodness, my heart, I'm sure everybody feels for the situation John and his wife are in at the minute. There are so many examples across all of our constituents, across the whole country, people who are struggling. The announcement yesterday, for example, that energy prices are about to rise yet again by an above estimated figure of about £100 a month, will put many people who are struggling to make ends meet, make their lives even more difficult. So it's really incumbent on the government now to say what they are going to do to drive down bills, drive down the cost of living.
But energy bills would still have gone up under the Conservatives if you'd have won the election.
Look, there are a whole host of reasons why energy prices have gone up. The wholesale cost of gas has risen, and we are relying more on gas in this country than other countries
Which is a reason why the government would say why it is important to invest in green energy.
Yes, but the front loading of the new renewables build is actually going to be adding more in the short term on bills. So whilst Labour went into the election, to go back to previous plan, promising to cut bills by £300 by the end of the decade, you do not hear Ed Miliband saying that very much anymore, because it is not going to happen because of the huge cost of building all of these new renewable plants that will be passed on to bill payers, in addition to the high cost of gas, which is already driving up bills across the country. So on that and on a whole host of different areas, people being laid off because companies cannot afford the national insurance hikes, which, by the way, were promised were not going to happen. Pensioners who have lost their winter fuel allowance. Farmers worrying about the future because and again, they were promised that the change to agricultural property relief would not be brought in. There's a whole host of different groups of people who, out in the country right now, for whom life is getting harder.
OK, Andrew, let's turn to Jonathan now, because Ian has written in, hi Ian, saying that Starmer was asked during PMQs about this £300 off energy bills, asking if it was an oversight to say that before the election or an outright lie. I mean, bills are going up, not down.
Well, that's still absolutely what we're aiming for, but we're 8 months in to our period in office. So I don't think anyone would expect us to be able to wave a magic wand and reduce energy prices. The problem is that we're incredibly reliant on fossil fuels from abroad. That is the fundamental problem here, and we need to invest in our own energy sources.
Jonathan, sorry, but you, in the election campaign, you promised £300 off energy bills.
Not within 8 months.
No, but by the end of this decade, all the projections suggest that is not going to be met. That promise is not going to be fulfilled. And yes, you might want to change the energy system as it is right now, but that was the energy system that you inherited. You did know that when you went into the election, and yet in your manifesto, people out there in the country who voted Labour in the expectation that their bills would be cut are now seeing their bills go up. And you have to answer that, because you are now...
And that's why we've got to move quickly. We've got to move really quickly to get ourselves away from this reliance on fossil fuels from abroad. So there's no inconsistency there. The problem is very grave, so we need to move quickly so that we can reduce those bills.
Under Labour's plans, we're going to be relying more on fossil fuels from abroad, because we're seeing an accelerated decline in the North Sea, specifically because no new licences are going to be issued. We're not allowed to explore or drill or exploit the resources underneath our own waters. And as a result, even the Climate Change Committee admits we're going to have to import more LNG from abroad to keep the lights on in this country. So we're going to become more reliant on foreign countries because of Labour's policies.
If we talk about low-carbon energy sources that we ourselves own in this country, what about nuclear? 14 years in office, the Conservatives did not move on it. We need a whole new fleet of nuclear power stations, SMR included in that, and that's what we're going to do. The Conservatives just delay, and that is where we are.
Look, in the last 2 years, the Conservative government, we launched Great British Nuclear, we began the small modular reactor down selection process, we cleared the way for the development of new nuclear, we announced a 3rd gigawatt scale project
years,
in
and
Wales.
How many nuclear power stations did you build?
One of the first things that Labour did when they came to office was scrap our plans for a new nuclear gigawatt-scale nuclear plant in North Wales. I do not resile from the accusation that we should have done more, but for 5 years of those 14, we had a Liberal Democrat Party also in government who were resisting at every step of the way development of new nuclear. We acted quickly when we could, but yes, of course, more could be done, and that's what Labour should be doing now.
OK, well, let's pause that discussion, because Sue from Plymouth has got in touch to talk about something perhaps more immediate to some people's lives. What plans are being considered to protect women and children from assaults by men on public transport, when walking to and from school, in shops, and when in other public places too? It feels like there's a growing sense of lawlessness and street violence in the UK.
And Jonathan, our Labour representative, you have some personal experience of this, because you were a police inspector before entering Parliament.
Yeah, so when I was serving as a police inspector, through from constable, sergeant to inspector, the police were being hollowed out. You know, we lost 20,000 officers across the country, and that's why neighbourhood policing basically disappeared. Now, of course, the Conservatives like to say, well, we had our Damascene conversion in 2019 and realised our mistake. But actually, the effects of that are still being felt. So we've said we're going to rebuild neighbourhood policing. We're actually going to have more officers on the streets. But when it comes to violence against women and girls, we've made that one of our top priorities, and it absolutely is. We're having domestic violence specialists in control rooms, so that this is one of our biggest priorities. And when it comes to every community, they are going to have a police officer that they can actually point to and say, they're our officer, in the small towns like those I represent.
But of course, policing budgets are incredibly stretched right now across all constabularies. And what we're seeing with the fund for community police officers on the beat, on the street, very often these are people under your plans that are actually going to be taken away from the back rooms of police departments. And indeed, we're not necessarily going to see per person police increasing in this country, just shuffled around.
Well, 13,000 extra police officers and PCSOs is what we've committed to, and that is what we're going to deliver.
And the population will rise by how many million this Parliament?
And money is tight. There's no doubt about the fact that we've inherited a really difficult fiscal situation, but this is one of our key priorities, and we are going to be delivering on it.
OK, Andrew Bower. I remember in 2010, between 2010 and 2015, that period of austerity under the David Cameron government, huge cuts to police officers. Isn't what has prompted Sue from Plymouth's question the result of those cuts that were made early on when you first got elected?
Well, no, I mean, in 2019, under the Boris Johnson government, we announced that we would be deploying 10,000 extra police officers across this country.
Which took you back to 2010.
Absolutely. And in terms of the what's just been said on violence against women and girls, I was privileged enough to serve on the Bill Committee for the Domestic Abuse Act, a Domestic Violence Act a few years ago, which at that time was the most far-reaching and consequential act when it came to tackling domestic violence in the UK, and indeed on this issue. And there are many issues in which we want to see the government succeed. We are wholly supportive of what the government are doing to drive down violence against women and girls in this country. It's a scourge in this country that needs to be dealt with, and if they succeed, they will have our full support.
Why has it been getting worse in the United Kingdom? It seems like it's got worse in the last few years. Of course, police numbers have been going up in the last few years. Is there a delay on this, or is it something else other than just the pure number?
I think it's a wider societal question that we've got to ask ourselves. It's not acceptable. As a father of a young girl, obviously, I look at it. It does worry me, the figures that you see. There are suggestions, an Andrew Tate generation. I don't know. If I had the answer to this question, then I'd be able to pose a solution to it. What I do know is that we must, as an opposition, constructively support the government in their efforts to drive down violence.
Could I just please do? I was just going to say on domestic violence and sexual abuse. Actually, the evidence is that it's staying pretty constant, but we're actually seeing more and more and more reports. So 30 years ago, policing wasn't really dealing with these issues. People didn't have the confidence to report and so forth. Now it is rightly core business dealing with domestic abuse. But actually, during that same time as those reports were rising, the police numbers were coming down. So that's why we've had this perfect storm, and that's where we are.
And just because you're both men, you referenced having a young daughter, but of course you've got sisters or mums, or you've certainly got mums. But you know, what do you think? Do you have any thoughts on what makes some men behave like this to, your sisters, daughters, friends, aunties?
Well, I don't claim to have any particular insight, but I think it's sexist, isn't it? I think that's kind of the legacy that we are dealing with, and as society moves on, people will kind of come to the conclusion that most of us do, that it's completely unacceptable. But it's a problem which is difficult to solve because it happens behind closed doors. You cannot patrol away domestic abuse. It is much more insidious than that. So let's not kind of just reach for kind of easy solutions and claim that we're going to be able to solve it overnight, because it's a societal issue as much as it is a police issue.
Whereas Jonathan says, reporting has gone up, but that huge step of reporting what is going on is sometimes the biggest barrier to taking action against this, because the fear that a woman or girl feels and the fear of being further abused as a result of reporting puts many women off actually doing that.
There have, however, been specific instances of crimes that we never used to see in the United Kingdom coming about in the last decade or so. Acid attacks seem to have been imported from Asia. Similarly, we've seen Pakistani grooming gangs in this country. Similarly, we've seen a rise in honour-based violence, in female genital mutilation. There are some clear and present issues that never used to be the problem in this country, that have been growing as problems in this country. There are clearly issues of integration here.
Look, I think we have to be absolutely clear that if you're going to come to this country, you should abide by the laws and the standards that this country expects of you. And I think that has to be made clear to anybody that comes to live in this country. And indeed, I don't think you would find any disambiguation between ourselves and indeed the government on this point.
Jonathan, Colin from Grimsby actually says about, on Andrew's point, on why can failed illegal immigrants continue to appeal their case. Now, this is a big debate to finish the show on. But that's a legitimate question, isn't it? Why do people don't feel the system is fair, and that if you come here illegally, then you should be, swiftly escorted out legally.
This came up at Prime Minister's Questions a couple of weeks ago, didn't it? And the Prime Minister was very clear that the government should decide who comes into the country, not judges, essentially, interpreting laws in different ways from what was intended, etc. So we've got to be absolutely clear. We are going to sort out the migration system. We're already making progress on that, both reducing net migration massively, which we clearly need to do from the levels we inherited from the Conservatives, but also that huge asylum backlog. We actually secure our borders so that we can actually be confident that the people who are here legally.
OK, well... But we really don't have much time. If you've got a 10-second statement, you can...
I was going to say that nearly 30,000 people have crossed into this country illegally since the point that Labour came into power. So I don't think that you're really on the path to dealing with that backlog as much as you might say you are.
I think we could have a whole show on this with these two. Labour MP for Pendle and Clitheroe, Jonathan Hinder, and Shadow Energy Minister Andrew Bower. You've been fantastic. Please come back. You have been watching and listening to PMQs Live with Gloria DiPiero and Tom Howard.
But don't go anywhere, because you've got another 2 hours of me with Emily Carver. Yes, it's Good Afternoon Britain, up next after the weather.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again, here's your latest GB News weather update from the Met Office. It was quite a wet start for many of us this morning, and that rain is going to clear away, but then behind it a mixture of sunshine and showers. At the moment there is a weather system pushing its way across the UK, and it's this that's brought quite a bit of rain so far this morning. But like I said, it pushes away towards the east, heavy rain lingering across parts of East Anglia and Kent for a little while as we go into the afternoon. Otherwise though, a mixture of sunshine and showers for many of us. The showers could be quite heavy at times though, with some hail, some thunder, maybe even a bit of snow over the hills and mountains. Across northern Scotland, largely dry here, some decent sunshine and temperatures around average for the time of year for most, just about getting to double figures towards the south. As we go into this evening, staying largely dry across some parts of northern Scotland, but there is a weak front pushing out towards the Hebrides, bringing some outbreaks of rain here. Also some rain pushing into the far east of Scotland as well. Across Northern Ireland, it's looking pretty cloudy and wet to end the day, and more rain also pushing across parts of Wales, and here we're likely to see a bit more snow over the higher ground as well. Elsewhere across the bulk of England, some clear skies as we go into the start of the night, and just a scattering of showers around. Most places will see the showers easing, but a zone of cloudier, wetter weather feeding in across parts of Wales, into the Midlands, and also across parts of northeast England for a time overnight. Away from this zone though, some clear skies allowing for a touch of frost in some places. Lowest temperatures likely to be across parts of Scotland where they are likely to drop a bit below freezing. As we go through tomorrow, a breezy day across far eastern parts, still a scattering of showers early on. Elsewhere, largely dry, largely sunny, but some showers still likely across parts of western Scotland in particular. Despite the fact that there will be a decent amount of sunshine on offer, temperatures aren't going to rise a huge amount compared to today. In fact, they look fairly similar, again just about getting into double figures.
A nice bright morning will generate a lovely warm day, right through to the evening. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Don't miss your chance to be one of 2 big winners in our latest Great British giveaway, as we have 2 prize bundles that have to be won. There's 2 lots of a totally tax-free £10,000 in cash. You'll also receive a brand new iPhone 16, along with £500 in shopping vouchers to spend at your favourite store. Hurry, lines close on the 7th of March. For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB11 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrants must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 7th of March. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
One former Royal Marine has just set up a state-of-the-art new fitness brand which combines fitness, dating, clubbing. It's all in a very unique experience.
Yes, Will McLaren and co-founder Toby Spooner have managed to fuse well-being, dating and what they call community building in their new full-day event, Metrics, which also includes high-intensity workouts. Will and Toby are joining us now in the studio.
Good morning, guys.
Good morning, gents.
Hey,
Thank you for joining us. I'm very interested in this because all I seem to see at the minute is high rocks. But from what I've read about Metrics, this seems like the new upgraded version. What can you tell us about it? Tell our viewers all about Metrics.
Well, it is a fitness competition, but we are combining the music and production element. Also, we want it to be quite a social event as well. So we want people to come, meet each other and have a great day out.
So what does that actually mean? Tell us a little bit more in detail. Toby, just tell us a little bit about what's involved.
So, in short, it's an immersive fitness competition.
Yeah.
So you can do a partner workout, you can bring a friend, or we can actually make people. So we're adding that dating element.
Well, it was Valentine's yesterday.
Precisely,
so
right.
is this going to be the new Tinder? People going along to Metrics and meeting their future partner?
Well, exactly that. So we've done a load of research into it, and what we've found is that exercise is slowly becoming more of a dating scene.
So is it, I assume, some behind the scenes of what Metrics will look like? Because it's still to start, isn't it? Is it big March it begins?
Yeah, so the 1st and 2nd of March, so it's in 2 weeks, at a magazine in North Greenwich.
We've known each other for a fair while, but we kind of put our heads together to